Good morning and welcome, dear friends, to our spiritual home, the Unitarian Universalist Church of Tarpon Springs. I'm Barbara Rosen, and I'm serving as your worship associate today. I use she, her pronouns, and am an older white woman, white hair, glasses to read, and green eyes with multicolors in the shirt. I'm black. For Mark, just there's some blue in here too, Mark. Angry. I hail from the Seneca Nations of Upper New York, and we want to acknowledge that here at the church, we are on the lands of the Tocobaga and Seminole peoples. We are a church of many welcomes, and we offer a warm welcome to all of you. This is a liberal community for all ages, promoting spiritual growth, social justice, and the arts. To learn more about events, our church calendar is on our website, uutarpon.org, or we'd be happy to talk with you during the coffee hour. For those present with us in the building, we have connection cards available in the pews near the hymnals. If you choose to fill one out both sides, we can stay in touch with you. There are also small cards if you would like to do joys or sorrows and prefer to do it in writing. And I'll read that at the end. You can also send us an email at membership@uutarpon.org to get connected. Our minister, Reverend Kristina Spaude, leads our service today. One flame for many paths, UUism today. Bonnie Whitehurst and our choir bring us the music. The opening hymn, number 407 in the gray hymnal. We're going to sit at the welcome table.
I am the Reverend Kristina Spaude. I use she, her pronouns and am a white woman. I am tall with shoulder-length curly brown hair, parted on one side, and blue eyes. Our opening words this morning come from Gretchen Haley. This is forged in the fire of our coming together. What's going to happen? Will everything be okay? What can I do? In these days, we find ourselves too often stuck with these questions on repeat. What's going to happen? Will everything be okay? What can I do? We grasp at signs and markers, articles of news and analysis, Facebook memes and forwarded emails as if the new zodiac, capable of forecasting all that life may yet bring our way, as if we could prepare, as if life had ever made any promises of making sense or turning out the way we thought, as if we are not also actors in a still unfolding story. For this hour we gather to surrender to the mystery, to release ourselves from the needing to know, the yearning to have it already figured out, and also the burden of believing we either have all the control or none. Here in our song and silence, our stories and our sharing, we make space for a new breath, a new healing, a new possibility to take root. That is courage, forged in the fire of our coming together and felt in the spirit that comes alive in this act of faith, that we believe still a new world is possible, that we are creating it already, here and now. Come, let us worship together.
We light our chalice with these words from Deborah Burrell. Fire consumes and casts a bright light. May our chalice flame consume our regrets for the past, our fears about the future, and our worries about today. May it light for us a path of joy and peace. And now we will read the covenant.
Together, we strive to look for and encourage the best in each other as we move toward justice, peace, and love for both ourselves and the world. And when we fall short, we will seek understanding, reconciliation, and a return to covenant.
And let us now sing hymn number 123, Spirit of Life.
Our story this morning is The Flaming Chalice by Dan Hotchkiss from the course of Faith's curriculum. At the opening of Unitarian Universalist worship services, many congregations light a flame inside a chalice. This flaming chalice has become a well-known symbol of our denomination. It unites our members in worship and symbolizes the spirit of our work. The flaming chalice combines two archetypes, a drinking vessel and a flame, and as a religious symbol has different meanings to different beholders. Chalices, cups, and flagons can be found worldwide on ancient manuscripts and altars. The chalice used by Jesus at his last Passover Seder became the Holy Grail sought by the Knights of Wales and England. Jan Hus, Czech priest and forerunner of the Reformation, was burned at the stake for proposing, among other things, that the communion chalice be shared with the laity. More recently, feminist writer Rianne Eisler has used the chalice as a symbol, as a partnership way of being in community. Sharing, generosity, sustenance, and love are some of the meanings symbolized by a chalice. As a sacrificial fire, flame has been a central symbol for the world's oldest scriptures, the Vedic hymns of India. Today, lights shine on Christmas and Hanukkah. Eternal flames stand watch at the monuments of tombs, and candles flicker in cathedrals, temples, mosques, and meeting houses. A flame can symbolize witness, sacrifice, testing, courage, and illumination. The chalice and the flame were brought together as a Unitarian symbol by an Austrian artist, Hans Deutsch, in 1941. Living in Paris during the 1930s, Deutsch drew critical cartoons of Adolf Hitler. When the Nazis invaded Paris in 1940, he abandoned all he had and fled to the south of France, then to Spain, and finally, with an altered passport, into Portugal. There, he met the Reverend Charles Joy, Executive Director of the Unitarian Service Committee. The Service Committee was new, founded in Boston to assist Eastern Europeans, among them Unitarians as well as Jews, who needed to escape Nazi persecution. From his Lisbon headquarters, Joy oversaw a secret network of couriers and agents. Deutsch was most impressed and soon was working for the USC. He later wrote to Joy, "There is something that urges me to tell you how much I admire your utter self-denial and readiness to serve, to sacrifice all, your time, your health, your well-being, to help, help, help. I am not what you may actually call a believer, but if your kind of life is the profession of your faith, as it is, I feel sure, then religion, ceasing to be magic and mysticism, becomes confession to practical philosophy and, what is more, to active, really useful social work. And this religion, with or without a heading, is one to which even a godless fellow like myself can wholeheartedly say yes." The USC was an unknown organization in 1941. This was a special handicap in a cloak and dagger world where establishing trust quickly across borders of language, nationality, and faith could mean life instead of death. Disguises, signs and countersigns, and midnight runs across guarded borders were the means of freedom in those days. Joy asked Deutsch to create a symbol for their papers to make them look official, to give dignity and importance to them, and at the same time symbolize the spirit of the work. When a document may keep a man out of jail, give him standing with governments and police, it is important that it look important. Thus, Hans Deutsch made his lasting contribution to the USC and, as it turned out, to Unitarian Universalism. With pencil and ink, he drew a chalice with a flame. It was, Joy wrote his board in Boston, a chalice with a flame, the kind of chalice which the Greeks and the Romans put on their altars. The holy oil burning in it is a symbol of helpfulness and sacrifice. This was in the mind of the artist. The fact, however, that it remotely suggests a cross was not in his mind, but to me, this also has its merit. We do not limit our work to Christians. Indeed, at the present moment, our work is 9/10 for the Jews. Yet we do stem from the Christian tradition, and the cross does symbolize Christianity and its central theme of sacrificial love. The flaming chalice design was made into a seal for papers and a badge for agents moving refugees to freedom. In time, it became a symbol of Unitarian Universalism all around the world. The story of Hans Deutsch reminds us that the symbol of a flaming chalice stood in the beginning for a life of service. When Deutsch designed the flaming chalice, he had never seen a Unitarian or Universalist church or heard a sermon. What he had seen was faith in action, people who were willing to risk all for others in a time of urgent need. Today, the flaming chalice is the official symbol of the UU Service Committee and the Unitarian Universalist Association. Officially or unofficially, it functions as a logo for hundreds of congregations. Perhaps most importantly, it has become a focal point for worship. No one meaning or interpretation is official. The flaming chalice, like our faith, stands open to receive new truths that pass the tests of reason, justice, and compassion. We will now sing our children to their programming with Jami and Anna Hees, and as we do so, I will light this candle to celebrate the light and love of this community, to hold them in their time together. The hymn is number 413 in the gray hymnal, Go Now in Peace.
The purpose of our church is to encourage all who gather here to grow more generous in spirit and in action. We now take an offering that allows us to exercise that all-important generosity of spirit, an offering that will support this self-supporting church and its many ministries. The gifts of the congregation will be most gratefully received. The next piece of music, Draw the Circle Wide.
Each week when we gather, we set aside time to hold a moment of silence, and I offer words of reflection to engage you during that moment if it is helpful for you. Our words this morning come from Harvard University's The Pluralism Project. They say, pluralism is an ethic for living together in a diverse society, not mere tolerance or relativism, but the real encounter of commitments. We will now hold silence together for a moment to let you settle into yourselves and your seat. You might take a few deep breaths into your belly if that is comfortable for you. We have two readings again this morning. The first is, we promise to live pluralistically, from Engaging Our Theological Diversity, a report from the Commission on Appraisal, published in 2005. UUs follow a theologically interdependent path since we belong to a heritage that drinks from assorted fountains. Unitarian Universalists select the finest wisdoms affirmed in all cultures. Religious pluralism is the denomination's peculiar slant. UUs aspire to live eclectically in the most resourceful sense, even though we fall short in practice. UUs are religious hybrids, mystical humanists, and naturalistic theists. We are grounded in Jewish and Christian lore, tempered by the traditions of skepticism and existentialism, and immersed in earth-based spirituality. Newcomers to the UU religious heritage can borrow or blend from all 6 of the enumerated sources and any others of their own fashioning in the Principles and Purposes text. Individual Unitarian Universalists are the final authors of their own religious identities and destinies, with companions in each beloved community doing likewise. Traditional religions typically claim one primary source as definitive. In contrast, Unitarian Universalism does not rank its sources according to revelatory importance. They are merely listed with the assumption that each delivers distinct and necessary truths for thickening UU's interdependence. Along with Unitarian forefather Ralph Waldo Emerson, UU's insists that the charm of life is this variety of genius, these contrasts and flavors by which heaven has modulated the identity of truth. And from his 2013 Ware lecture, Ibu Patel says in part, "In preparation for this talk, I've been reading A Chosen Faith, and one particular line from the book jumps out at me. Denise Taft Davidoff writes, 'We struggle to speak our Unitarian Universalism to each other, and particularly to the interfaith world beyond the walls of our societies.' Trust me, you are not the only ones who face this challenge," he says. "But for a faith or moral community, I'm not sure that there is a more important struggle. There is a great power when you speak your faith. As the great Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel says, speech has power. Words do not fade. What starts out as a sound ends in a deed. What UU stories, language, ideas might you call upon to give expression to your conviction that interfaith cooperation is an article of your faith? The fact is, you don't have to look very far at all in UU thought or literature to find that language. The idea of difference as enriching is woven into your tradition. Beautifully expressed by Adlai Stevenson, the US presidential candidate and Unitarian layperson. There's nothing to fear in difference. Difference, in fact, is one of the healthiest and most invigorating of human characteristics, without which life would become meaningless. Even more, you believe that difference is holy. Not only do you believe this, you act on it. You have what I call a theology of interfaith collaboration at your fingertips. For those of you who tend toward the humanist dimension of the UU Fellowship, the term ethic of interfaith cooperation might feel more comfortable. Bottom line, the resources for cooperation with people who are different lie at the center of the thought and practice of the UU movement.
Just one to
So there will be some more nerddom today, but maybe not quite as much as last time. There aren't any maps this time, so at least there's that, I guess. 2 weeks ago, I preached on the European part of our Unitarian history, which really didn't impact our US American history much until the 1990s. But since that time, it has helped us grow in ways that would have been otherwise unexpected. Within the narrative of our very cool Unitarian history in Transylvania, Unitarianism does exist in other parts of Europe too, Poland and England primarily, is the way that Unitarianism emerged there. Rejecting Trinitarianism for theological but also relational reasons was central in their identity formation. Specifically, Unitarians found Trinitarianism objectionable because it needlessly separated Christianity from the other Abrahamic religions, their and our siblings, Judaism and Islam. All this began in the 1500s and has remained their religious identity all these generations, despite persecution. American Unitarianism took a different route, informed by completely different circumstances. To some degree, thinkers and religious people were informed by English Unitarianism, but Unitarianism was also a homegrown shift in thinking about religion and its application to life and the world here and now, as well as the hereafter. I'll be drawing a bit from A Stream of Light, a short history of American Unitarianism, edited by Conrad Wright. Before we get to the Unitarian part of the history, I want to remind everyone of our polity and the basis of our faith. Covenant comes from our way back heritage that goes straight back to the Puritans and Pilgrims. When they came to America, although they were clear that they disagreed with various theologies in Europe, they didn't all share the same beliefs. In an effort to figure out how they might be together despite not sharing all their beliefs, they spent years having house meetings and conversations that eventually brought into being the Cambridge Platform of 1648. You are supposed to cheer now. Perfect. Among them, they agreed to be in covenant with one another. Each congregation was allowed to self-govern, and how this would be set up was established in the platform, including the election of officers from within the congregation. This form of governance became known as Congregationalist. Our faith comes from this tradition, as does the United Church of Christ and our Congregationalist siblings. Fast forward more than a century, and as with our Universalist heritage, Unitarian theology began to gain traction before it was institutionalized. And not institutionalized in the way of, institutionalized. Although some people might have preferred that. With the Unitarians, this happened more slowly than for the Universalists, in part likely because the Unitarians were extricating themselves from an existing church structure. I think that the idea of becoming Unitarian in an ocean of Trinitarianism was far more challenging than contemplating God's unending love for us. American Unitarianism was shaped by men like Charles Chauncey and Jonathan Mayhew in the 18th century, who began questioning Calvinist doctrines of original sin and eternal punishment. This evolved over a couple of generations into simply not preaching on the Trinity at all among some preachers. And, as you might guess, you can hear there's a little bit of an inkling of universalism with a small u in there too. The two halves of our Christian heritage have always danced with and around each other. Liberalism was growing during this time frame, and this shift became clear when the Reverend Henry Ward was elected to the oldest endowed chair position, the Hollis Professorship of Divinity at Harvard College in 1805, following a lot of contention. This moment is considered by some as the beginning of what has become known as the Unitarian controversy. We have always been a controversial people. These ministers and others who supported engaging with biblical commentary and criticism as an important aspect of ministerial training experienced shunning and ridicule along with name-calling. Accused of being unchristian due to their non-Trinitarian beliefs, in 1815, William Ellery Channing attempted to soothe the more conservative religious academics, but to no avail. In fact, trenches were dug deeper. So this was the context for the ordination sermon in 1819 that marked the official launch of the Unitarians. A Unitarian church had been gathered and dedicated in Baltimore in 1818. They were calling a new graduate, Jared Sparks, to their pulpit, and as Channing had been his mentor, he was offered the sermon. It was titled Unitarian Christianity and has been referred to as the most famous sermon ever delivered in America. I'm not sure that still holds true, but for a long time it was. Channing proclaimed in this sermon the scriptural basis of the unity of God, followed by the unity of Christ, that is, that Jesus is distinguished from God in the scriptures. He argued for the moral perfection of God, that their goodness is infinite, that their justice and mercy make blasphemous the doctrine of human depravity, the perversion of the will, and eternal damnation. Channing argued that Christ was sent to be our Savior, a moral example to reconcile us to God. Last, he declared that the nature of true holiness can be seen in one's love of God, love to Christ, and love toward each other. In 90 minutes, you're welcome for not preaching for 90 minutes, Channing laid out the principles that informed his and others' Unitarian theology. Unitarianism shifted from being a pejorative term to one used with pride. Within the year, about a third of formerly Congregationalist churches in Boston became Unitarian, and most of the men in positions in power in Boston, especially professors, judges, literary men, and more, were Unitarian. With a sudden rising number of Unitarian churches, clergy were aware that they needed some kind of organization. In 1820, the Berry Street Conference came to be, the same one we continue to hold every year. Its purpose was and is to bring together clergy to talk about matters of current importance. The Constitution of the American Unitarian Association was adopted in 1825, formally separating the Unitarians from the Congregationalists. In the years then before the Civil War, the newly formed Unitarians struggled primarily with two matters: the question of slavery on the justice side and the question of religion's purpose on the spiritual and academic side. In the 1830s and 40s, people like Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry David Thoreau, Theodore Parker, and Margaret Fuller emerged as important voices in literary and intellectual history. They were among the Transcendentalists. Emerson described their role this way: there are always two parties, the party of the past and the party of the future, the establishment and the movement. The Transcendentalists identified themselves as the movement here. They were what we might call pantheists today, or among religious naturalists, who saw and felt God everywhere in creation and themselves. They extensively read Hindu mysticism as well as European romantics like Goethe and Coleridge. There they found a love of nature that resonated, but also their sense of passion. In 1838, Emerson, who had resigned from Unitarianism in 1832, gave his famous Harvard Divinity School address to their graduating class. He protested Unitarian beliefs in what he called supernatural rationalism, arguing that God could easily be found and experienced in nature. Basically, he encouraged people to go out into nature and get right with God and the world, and trusted that that would help navigate our relationships with each other as neighbors, and that was all we needed. In 1841, Parker then delivered his famous sermon. Everybody gets a famous sermon at this point. The Transient and the Permanent in Christianity, which offered his proclamation of transcendentalist principles, and this was also an ordination sermon. In the category of transient were creeds, confessions, and all doctrine, as well as the whole of the scriptures, and even the personal authority of Christ. The permanent, he argued, was pure morality, or what was called reason among the transcendentalists. He caused a lot of distress for the fairly young denomination, as his views greatly upset clergy in other, more conservative traditions, and caused Unitarians to wonder what the boundaries of belief were for their ministers and their people. The distress was made worse by Parker's insistence that he was not going to resign his position. He continued to share his ideas and continued to attract younger, newer clergy with his beliefs. Some people and ministers did leave Unitarianism over the transcendentalist controversy. Again, we are a controversial people, but most did not. Unitarianism began then to spread outside of New England, even all the way west through the work of Thomas Starr King. In 1865, the National Conference of Unitarian Churches was established, and Unitarianism became a structured denomination for the first time. Fast forward again, and the first Humanist Manifesto was published in 1933. It included among its 34 signing ministers many Unitarians and at least one Universalist. Given the Unitarian history that I've laid out so far, this isn't a surprising trajectory of belief, especially as we consider both what was going on in the world at the time and what the world had experienced in the generation leading up to it. Some humanists were called to leave Unitarianism to form the American Humanist Association, but others, like Parker did 3 generations before, stayed. They pushed the boundaries of belief of our faith, making it again a little bit bigger and a little more flexible. There is overlap in belief among many humanists and UUs still. Once the door to other non-Christian identities was cracked open, of course that opening continued until it was as wide as possible. Accepting the various beliefs and not requiring a statement of belief or confession as a standard in Christian churches made our UU congregations a welcoming space for people from a variety of other backgrounds, including Jewish, and growing now to hold people who are Muslim, pagan, atheist, Buddhist, Hindu, and others. We have also become a welcoming religious space for those who are in interreligious marriages and those who may be in interreligious or not partnerships and want their children to appreciate people of a variety of religious traditions and other identities. Add in our partner church program, which led to exchange between American and Transylvanian Unitarian churches at first, and then other international churches, and our history is one rich with pluralism, as we embody in our congregations far more of a theological spectrum than any other religion. We have had the 6 sources as a cornerstone of how our experiences and faith has been shaped. In the last few years, we have begun considering how else our faith, our living tradition, our seeming shape-shifting theology, restless for greater inclusion and widening the scope of curiosity and wonder, how it might be grounded and talked about in a way that more accurately holds all of us, while also carrying us forward. covenant has always been the key for our possibility. A group charged by the UUA board has been wondering about our possibilities and understanding who we have become and who we yet hope to be. Their proposal emerged to make love the center with equal values radiating from and interconnected with it. The final formal proposal at last year's General Assembly came forward with 6 values whose acronym can be JETPIG: justice, equity, transformation, pluralism, interdependence, and generosity. Ours is a living tradition. James Luther Adams famously wrote that revelation is continuous, and those words resonate for us deeply 3 generations later. As seeking people who ask hard and deep questions, we have never stopped growing and changing. And every time we do grow and change, when we are shaped by trends and answering our heart's own calls, we pause and reflect on who we are, who we have become, and who we still want to be. Where do we want to go? What of the past is important for us to carry forward, and what might be better left behind? And every time, sometimes people choose to leave. It's usually a small number, but it happens. And every time, people also find their way to us, find their way in our faith to knowing and feeling included. Unitarians were shook by the Transcendentalists, and it raised these questions of identity for our ancestors. They once claimed a clear call for Jesus and God Jesus as exemplar, and for God, one to show us the way. But now, what now? How could we think that even time alone and living our lives hasn't changed the way we think about things? I certainly hope that we've grown from our beliefs, as most recently updated in Article 2's 7 Principles from 1987. I know we have, if for no other reason than because in the last decade plus, an 8th principle has been proposed for consideration, which more than a 5th of our congregations have adopted. The Article 2 revisions help us frame a different understanding of our beliefs and the boundaries of how we want to be in covenant with one another. They name what we value and how and why. And I really appreciate how these are values. The question of beliefs has long been a complicated one for UUs for a time, but values feels like something that we can all get behind. It's what I've used as a way to explain Unitarian Universalism to our faith formation educators about what's important to share about our faith with our children and youth. Beliefs come with a lot of, it depends, whereas values come with clearer statements. Along with the questions of adding an 8th principle and then reviewing all of the principles was a question about our 6 sources, which leave out some fairly large traditions that are important to our faith, specifically Islam and Buddhism. But even in their naming, there's no accounting for every religion a person may have left or still be holding when they come in our doors. Taking that question and just naming that we value pluralism, whatever shape it takes in a particular congregation or area, and Unitarian Universalism as a whole, affirms our respect and appreciation for all of who we are and all the ways we as individuals and as communities can be shaped. We have, as a faith, embraced how we have grown and learned from other traditions and practices, and we have been enriched because of this. Each of us who identifies as UU or attends our congregations is held each week by our heritage of seeking and welcoming in. We appreciate those who have challenged us to reach a little more, honored our multitudes, and called this faith, these people, this tradition our own. Our covenants remind us that we don't need to agree on everything so long as we make our way in conversation together. Our chalice flame reminds us that we are meant to gather together as we recognize the joys and sorrows and everything else that comes with our living. And it grounds us as we find our ways in the world, using whatever theologies and practices, as well as truth, beauty, and wisdom are brought to us and bring us comfort and meaning. The legacy of our ancestors is that we may find in our togetherness healing and belonging and awareness that we are held in love always. If you would please rise in body or in spirit and lift your voice in song with me for our closing hymn, number 118 in the gray hymnal, This Little Light of Mine. In The Gift of Faith, Jean Harrison Newyard has written, in the lore of ancient China, there is a story of a philosopher who was asked, where is the road called hope? He replied, it does not exist, but as people move upon it, it comes into being. I invite you to continue moving forward on this path, this journey of seeking and wonder with me.
Get busy. Singing your ear.
This is the sound of one voice, one spirit, one voice. Sound of man who makes a choice. This is the sound of one voice. This is the sound of one voice. sound of voices too. The sound of me singing with you, helping each other to make it through. This is the sound of voices too. This is the sound of voices too. This is the sound of voices three, singing together in harmony, surrendering to the mystery. This is the sound of voices three. This is the sound of voices three. This is the sound of all of us, singing in love and the will to trust. Leave rest behind, it'll turn to us. This is the sound of all of us. This is the sound of all of us. This is the sound of one voice, one people, one voice, a song for every one of us. This is the sound of one voice. This is the sound of one voice.
Hey, good job.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Mark.
They are amazing. We hope that you found meaning in today's service. We close with these words from Maureen Killeran. We extinguish this chalice flame, daring to carry forward the vision of this free faith, that freedom, reason, and justice will one day prevail in this nation and across the earth.